The death of Pope Francis now setting in motion a centuries-old process by the conclave in the Vatican to elect his successor. But this, of course, will not begin for at least 15 days after the Pope's death. Many say the election of a new pontiff is incredibly unpredictable, but that hasn't stopped some pundits from presenting a few names. Pope Francis, of course, was the first Latin American leader of the Catholic Church, and he died yesterday at the age of 88. He's said to be buried within a week, which will be followed by 9 days of official mourning. These are live visuals for you that we're showing from the Vatican City, more specifically at the St. Peter's Basilica. But let's have a conversation now about what happens next and speak to the Dean at the School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics. That's with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. That's Professor Simangaliso Kumalo, who's with us via our video link. Prof, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us about what is, to many people, both in and out of the church, a fascinating process. And perhaps you can begin with what you have come to learn will happen from now. And I'm speaking more specifically when it comes to the election of a new pope. Pope Francis has already been said to have elected a few of his own cardinals who come from all manner of places in the world. He was a pope who was really obsessed with representing people on the margins, and that's why there were a few people who come from places that perhaps you wouldn't expect who are going to be part of this conclave.
Indeed. Good morning, Ayanda. Thank you for having me. And indeed, condolences to the 1.4 billion Catholics in the global community, on which about 272 million of them are Africans. And so indeed, it is a very sad day, but also a day where a great life and a week where a great life is going to be celebrated by the global community because of who Prof. Francis was and the way that he exercised his ministry. And I think it was put very well by Somadoda Figen in one of the groups that I'm part of, when he summarized it and said, the Pope has left not just a vacancy, but a legacy that needs to be filled by very great people on anyone that they are going to be choosing in the church. But he has left a very, very big legacy behind by taking the choice to minister to those and bring and include those who are on the margins of society to the center. You have asked a very important question of what actually happens from now on. We are currently in the days of the 9 days of mourning that Catholics from all over the world are actually observing. And in fact, even those who are not Catholic, like some of us and others, who are not necessarily Catholic, but because the Catholic Church is an institution that is global, that is powerful, that is very, very rooted in communities and in people's lives, almost everyone is aware and is following up the processes of what's going to be happening from now on. But currently, they're just preparing for the interment or burial of the Pope. And the cardinals have been summoned already to go to Rome, to the Vatican. And they will be meeting almost on a daily basis, making sure that the church is running efficiently, but also preparing for the burial of the Pope.
And what we told those meetings are about is to essentially take stock of where the church is, to try and understand what the main challenges are and who is best placed then to move the church forward. Which brings us to the next question. I mean, many who are part of the Catholic Church say that it is actually the Holy Spirit through the cardinals who elects the new pope. But I mean, we also live in a world where the church, like any other institution, is susceptible to human influence. And I imagine there's going to be a lot of lobbying and discussions that take place in the corridors of the Vatican.
Of course, of course, of course. That's what's going to happen. That's the nature of the church. The church is both a divine institution and a human institution. So all churches go through this process where they have to elect their leaders, and they pray. It's a moment of discernment. And in fact, one cannot underestimate the influence of the Holy Spirit, because the cardinals, when they go into the conclave, they will be locked up in a separate space and hostel that they will be looked after, which is prepared for this function. They will not be connected to the outside world. They will not be looking at televisions. Their cell phones will be taken away from them. They will all be, those 136 cardinals will be there, and only those who are under 80 of age will be allowed to vote in this process. It is believed, because it's also a moment of reflection, moment of prayer, moment of discernment. But of course, as you rightfully say, churches are not immune from lobbying and outside influences and political maneuverings. We don't know how those will influence and reach the cardinals from where they are. But of course, having known that the Pope has been sick for the past few weeks, people have already been talking. We cannot rule out that people have already been talking and thinking about who is next, who is going to come. But the good thing with the world of the church is that no matter who ends up being chosen, once they are chosen, the church embrace that person as having been chosen by God, and they believe God can use any instrument. So God can use any individual who then finds themselves in that position. So that's what we are looking forward to.
And you know, as you speak about the names being thrown around, I'm reminded that every time we get to this point of the history of the church, there's always really similar questions that come up. And one of them, I'm sure we can predict, is questions around whether or not the church is ready for its first black pope, for example, whether they're ready for their first pope from the African continent. And of the names that that I've come across, the lists, and I'm sure there are multiple lists, there are a few African cardinals there who are said to be front runners, if you like. Peter Turkson is from Ghana, we're told. There's another one from Guinea, whose name I'm looking for very quickly. There you go, Robert Serra, a 79-year-old, so he doesn't seem to have much time to be in the conclave. But there's also a Philippine cardinal who is said to, have the interest of many people. And I wonder what you make of these lists. I mean, do you find that they typically point us to the right direction? Or do you agree with people who say that the process is just way too unpredictable to call?
The good news, Ayanda, is that it would not be for the first time that a black pope or a pope from Africa is elected. In fact, in the years 189 to 199, there was a Pope Victor, the first African Pope, in fact, who came from North Africa. And then in the years 311 to 314 AD, just those 3 years, and very, very critical years in the life of the church, because that was the time of Emperor Constantine, when actually the church had to meet and finalize the issues about the scriptures, about the creeds and all sorts of things and all that. Church and state relations. There was a black pope there, Pope Miltiades, from 311 to 314. And then another one came, Pope Gelasius, who was there just for about 4 years, from 492 to 496. So there is a great precedent where the blacks or the Africans have been popes. And of course, there's this huge gap between then and today. And in fact, unfortunately, global racism has also gained so much ground in the world, that it is a big task and a big dream to imagine that they will go for a black pep, not because there are no black cardinals that are capable for this. One hopes and prays that they will. And of course, this process is so unpredictable, because even Pope Francis himself, he was not necessarily a front runner. He wasn't really popular. He came as the first person from Latin America to become the Pope. So it does happen. These things do happen. It is possible. And we hope that, especially because Africa has got more Catholics now than other parts of the world, with about 270 million Catholics. And the growth of Catholicism is actually centered around Africa than other parts of the world. That might need to be considered. But of course, the Catholic Church is not some small church that allows itself to be easily shaped and influenced by being politically correct. There's always a lot that is considered when they are arriving to such decisions. And so we look hoping that something good is going to come, even for Africa.
Yeah, we often hear that the church is in the world, but is not of the world. And I imagine that they're going to be holding on to that for the next couple of centuries, if the past history is anything to go by. Professor Simangaliso Kumalo, what a pleasure. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us and for helping us get a better understanding of what lies ahead for this centuries-old institution.